Better late than never, but BYU showed up in a big way as they smashed Portland State 69-0. And this is your Postcast, recapping it all right here on Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a special Postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast, and as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Apologies for being a little bit late tonight. Had this scheduled for 11:30, but memo to self, don't leave the stadium and forget a critical piece of equipment, aka your camera, that you actually need to, do your work. So had to backtrack, grab that from LaVell Edwards Stadium, and then book it home. So apologies for being a little bit late on the Postcast tonight, but BYU absolutely demolished Portland State tonight, 69-0. I'm going to use the famous phrase from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 69 dudes. BYU looked very polished, very clean, but also Portland State is not good. Now, I think there's a happy medium in all of that, and we're going to get to that ahead on this Postcast of the show. We'll talk about some of the takeaways. We'll get your guys' comments worked in as well. We also take a look around the Big 12, some other games in action. I know Utah's been rolling over UCLA. Also, Hawaii and Arizona doing battle right now. And what is Kansas State doing? That's another thing we can get into, and we'll get to your comments as well. So let's dive right in. But 69-0 is your final in Provo. And before we get too far into this, how good did BYU's running game look? Now, we saw a week ago, Tarleton State ran for 301 yards against this Portland State squad, and BYU won up that to the tune of 468 total yards. BYU averaged 9.8 yards per carry. They nearly averaged a first down every time they ran the football. We saw looking at this depth chart, not depth chart, the box score, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different ball carriers had at least one carry in this game. And anybody who wants to be upset about BYU running it up on Portland State, what were they supposed to do? They had their 4th, 5th, 6th string running backs in this game. And if Portland State can't stop it, Kalani Sitake is not going to stop playing football. And he talked about post-game that Bruce Barnum, head coach of Portland State, understood what was going on. BYU pulled their starters at halftime. So everything was good on that front. But I think BYU showed that they can run the football. And they're going to run the football with impunity. Now, better opponents are obviously on the horizon, starting up with Stanford a week from now, and looking forward to seeing how they match up against the Cardinal. But looking at the starting offense in particular in this game, I was really impressed with the poise that Bear Bachmeier showed. I was very much looking forward to seeing how he settled in. And it wasn't a perfect start for BYU. Any of you who watched this game, watched BYU punt it, and they also had a fumble from Parker Kingston on a punt return. They gave the ball back to Portland State in a dangerous area. So it was not a perfect start by any means for BYU. But that blocked field goal that Jack Kelly housed from, was it 50 yards out or whatever it was, that essentially woke BYU up. And then from then on, it was boots to you-know-what. And I think BYU showed that this is a team that's got a kill switch, and they piled it up 49-0 at halftime. I was wanting to see a little bit more of Bear Bachmeier because he didn't throw the football a lot when you don't really need to when you run for 468 yards. I acknowledge that, but I did hope to see him for at least a series or two in that second half. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. We'll get to your comments here momentarily. They're flowing in right now. And by the way, you can weigh in with all of this, but I think you look at the performance for BYU as a whole, it's a very positive performance. And the first string offense in particular, I thought showed exactly what you wanted to see from their first game. They looked poised. They looked polished. There was not a lot of bad mistakes, bad penalties, and the like. Those you usually see in the first game of the year, some false starts and the like. The first string offense, to what I can recollect, didn't have any of that. Really, the only penalty issue that was egregious, in my opinion, is a very, very poor decision from Ephraim Asiata on that targeting hit, and it was absolutely targeting. He hits him right in the chin with the crown of his helmet and gets ejected from the game. The good news, if you want to look at it that way, was it was in the first half, so you only had to sit out the second half, and he'll be available against Stanford. And I just look at the way that this BYU team performed. that with the first string unit in particular, they did exactly what I think you would hope they would do. They absolutely dominated the second quarter by far. And then, they lifted them at halftime. The nice part in the second half is with the second and third, meaning the fourth string, depending on which position you're looking at, they got valuable game reps. Now, Portland State's by no means a world beater. We've already acknowledged that fact. But getting guys in these games that haven't had game action before, that gives them some semblance of understanding, okay, this is what I need to do to succeed at this level. That is a big part of it. And also we should acknowledge in the special teams game, it's unfortunate that Parker Kingston fumbled that, but besides that, pretty flawless in terms of BYU's overall execution in special teams. And got to say congratulations to Will Farron. Ties the BYU all-time record with a 56-yard field goal that I feel like would have been good from 60 easily. We talked with him in post-game, and I asked him the question, what's your range? And he didn't really put a number on it, but the way he booted that ball, it feels like 60 plus, and a record is very much within reach. I guess a standalone record, because he tied Ethan Pochman in 2000, who did against New Mexico with a 56-yarder. So I think at some point, if Will Farron is given the opportunity, he absolutely will own that record in terms of the longest field goal in BYU football history. He's got a big leg. I don't know how many of you saw, you probably did see it. His kickoffs in the first half in particular, the first couple of them, he put those things 5 yards beyond the end zone. I felt like if he really wanted to wail away on one, he probably could put a kickoff into the stands, put it into the rock, into the student section. That would be pretty incredible. And I think that he showed that he's got a big leg. He is absolutely nails when it comes to going out there and performing in situations, whether the pressure packed or not, because as we all recall, the 44-yard field goal to beat Utah last year up there in Rice-Eccles Stadium, dude was smiling on the sideline of that game. A lot of guys weren't smiling, but he was smiling, and he was ready to go out there and play. I will also say this. 64,000 plus of you packed into LaVell Edwards Stadium. It was the biggest crowd in quite some time. I think it was back to like 2010 or some such. That wasn't cool to see, because I know that Portland State, they're not a program that's going to make you think, you know what I need to do on this Saturday night? I need to get down to LaVell Edwards Stadium and watch the BYU Cougars play. Yeah, it was a season opener. There's a lot of excitement for BYU football being back, but the opponent obviously is less than what you probably were hoping for. But I got to give mad props to all of you out there in Cougar Nation who packed into LaVell Edwards Stadium. And the nice part was, even at halftime and beyond that, it was still very much packed to the gills. And I really appreciated the way that BYU fans showed up. Were at full roar. You could have told me that BYU was playing Utah, and I would have believed it in certain circumstances of that game. It showed that BYU fans, y'all have been jonesing for football. We've all been hoping to watch BYU play. But beyond that, I really do think that it's a credit to BYU fans in general that you guys show up no matter who the opponent is. And it also extends to all other sports. I think I saw last night that South Field, as BYU took down Auburn, and women's soccer had more than 4,600 fans in attendance down there at South Field. I can never forget how impactful Cougar Nation is, and y'all show up no matter where they go. So it's really fun to see that as well. All right. So a couple other things I want to get to in terms of takeaways from this BYU game, I'll share next. I do also want to get a look at what's going on in the Big 12, because I think it's been a much better Saturday, all things considered, than it has been the first 2 days of this weekend. And we'll dig into that. We'll continue on momentarily as you roll on this Postcast edition of Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, college football is back. I don't have to tell you guys that. And obviously, we all couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets, that can be a little bit of a hassle. That's where I want you guys to go and check out Game Time. It is the app that gives the advantage back to you as fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices, but more importantly, with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay right there in the app. It's something being tacked on when you try and check out. Obviously, when you go online to Game Time, you're going to be able to see exactly where your seat is located and actually the view from your seat right there in the app. And I also really appreciate their zone deals. If you don't necessarily care which particular seat you're sitting in, you pick a zone, a section, and they pick the seats, and you save big along the way. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that I have bought tickets, and I encourage you guys to give it a shot as well. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and redeem the promo code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you being with us on this Postcast edition of the show. All right, so a couple other things to take away from this game tonight, because I have said it before, I'll say it again, the FCS games are tough to really kind of glean a ton from, but I will say this, BYU's defense is downright elite. They held Portland State to -5 rushing yards. That was the most, or what am I trying to say? It's the worst rushing performance for a BYU opponent since the 2010 New Mexico Bowl. They held UTEP in that game to -12 yards, but holding Portland State to -5 yards and 51 total yards. Mind you, BYU piled up 606 total yards on offense. When you outgain a team by 550 yards, that's utter domination. And that, in no small part, major credit's got to go to the BYU defense. And the nice part was it was comprehensive across the board. They brought in 2s, they brought in 3s, they brought in 4s in terms of the depth chart for BYU in this game. Every one of them took a pride in making sure that Portland State was going to have no success getting the ball anywhere near the end zone. And that was really cool to see, because it feels like in these games, the FCS games, you get a third and the fourth string unit out there and they start to have some success against it, speaking of the opponent. And BYU just said, no, that's not going to happen tonight. I also think that Portland State, they're going to be hard-pressed to win a game this year if that's the way they're going to play. I would also acknowledge that. It's readily apparent that they are up against it with Bruce Barnum as their head coach and the like. But I also acknowledge that when you hold a team to 51 yards, I don't care what level of college football they come from. It's pretty downright dominant stuff from the Cougars. The other thing is I also look at the way that Bear Bachmeier operated in this game. A couple of you asking this, let's see. Lamas right here said, I'm going to throw this up here. I was surprised how poised Bear was. He was very poised. That's the thing about this. He was very much a guy who was comfortable. And he actually kind of talked about it post-game when we were sitting there in the press conference. He said that it was fine. It was good to be out there. He didn't necessarily feel out of sync, but once he finally got hit, it's kind of funny how guys go out there and all of a sudden they take one lick and it's like, oh, hey, we are playing football. Let's go do our thing. And it kind of felt that way for Bear. 5 total touchdowns, not a huge stat line for him. You look at his stats overall, pretty pedestrian. I thought he was going to do more. 7 of 11 for 97 yards, had 3 touchdowns passing. And then also he had, 32 yards rushing? Let's see. That's Bear Bachmeier. Yeah, 32 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns rushing. And the second touchdown run in particular was the most impressive to me, because if you go back and watch that play, and I'm going to see if I can find a way to throw it out on social media, you kind of see him he hesitates, kind of dekes the defenders, and just drives upfield and shows off his wheels and then dives into the end zone. Now, Kalani Sitake did acknowledge that he's kind of scared of a guy like that going airborne, because crazy things happen when you leave your feet in football. But I do think that Bear showed enough to think, okay, yeah, there's a reason why he won the QB job coming out of camp. I really do think that you look at his performance and say, I can see what happens when they kind of open it up. Because to your point, Robert, here, you threw this up here. Do you feel disappointed they didn't open the game a little bit more for Bear? Quite honestly, I think they were trying to. But when you have a guy like LJ Martin, did LJ finish with just 8 carries? Yeah, 8 carries, 131 yards for LJ Martin. When he averages 16.4 yards per carry, and a guy like Cody Hagan, for example, he takes that, it was like a fake reverse sweep deal. It was crazy. It was absolutely nuts. And he rushes 57 yards for a score. Okay, you may want to open it up and allow Bear Bachmeier to throw the football, but if you're scoring and running for 15 plus yards every time a guy touches the football, seemingly in the case of LJ Martin, kind of hard to generate many more looks for a guy like Bear. So I guess that's to your point, Robert. That's why I wanted to see him maybe get a chance to throw it a little bit more by opening the second half and actually playing a series or two. But I also understand that Kalani Sitake, he said, hey, the only thing we were looking for from Bear the rest of the performance or the rest of the game was a 2-minute drill. And then BYU gets the ball back with like 1:50. And to Bear's credit, operated the 2-minute drill very effectively, drove him right down the field. They punch in a touchdown, and it's 49-0. You got half 100 already on these guys. And Kalani, he said his wife called him after the game, said, hey, you got to stop looking so disappointed when your team goes up 60 whatever. Because I saw the screenshot. I didn't get a chance to pull it because, like I said, I was late getting on this live stream. But I really did think it was funny that he kind of had this sour look on his face. And LaVell Edwards did this a lot, folks. I talked about earlier this week. There was a UTEP game. The BYU beat them 83-7. I watched it. Was it 2008? It was 2008. I was there at LaVell Edwards Stadium. I was not working in the media at the time. I was there in the student section. I watched BYU absolutely demolish a UCLA team who's getting demolished by Utah right now, 59-0. And so BYU's had big performances, and they've absolutely, in some people's minds, maybe run it up on these opponents. But you still got to play football. You can't just take a knee 3 times and punt it and finish the game. That's not going to happen. So I really do think that the way BYU performed in this game indicates that they're intent on following up last year in an emphatic fashion. So the biggest thing is, understand that it is one game. Understand that it is an FCS opponent, maybe one of the worst FCS teams that I have seen in quite some time. I would compare that Portland State team, one of like FCS games BYU's played of yesteryear. Remember the Wagner game or the Savannah State game? Savannah State's last game as an FCS program, I think, was at BYU. It was 50-something-0, and Savannah State then went down to Division II the very following season. So they've played some pretty horrendous FCS teams, and I put Portland State on that list in terms of the worst they played. But I think the bigger thing is BYU takes confidence out of this. They have a lot of guys who got a lot of experience in terms of playing time. Like, for example, Connor Pay's younger brother, speaking of Trevor Pay. I want to say Trevin, but Trevor Pay. He's playing center out there with the second and third string units and played a large chunk, if not the entire second half. Joe Brown, a guy that many of you have been wondering about in terms of if he's going to finally reemerge after that knee injury he suffered last year. They're getting game reps in a game like this, and that in many respects is more valuable than what we observed from Bear or what we observed from the first string offense. Is these guys getting actual game reps that's going to embolden them and say, hey, I can play at this level. I can still play football. So I really like that. Okay, a couple comments here. Let's slow these up here before we wrap up this edition because I don't have a lot more to go on. So I want your guys' comments on this. I also will get to some of our insider stuff. I got to pull that up here. I was kind of scrambling to get on air because I was 20 minutes late. But beyond that point, Joseph Farnes, interesting here. I'm feeling another 10-2 season is in the making. Got to see more passing from Bear, though. I think we all do. 11 passes, not enough to really get a full feel for how Bear Bachmeier will play at the FBS/Power 4 level as a passer. But I think next week when Stanford comes in, Stanford's got some bona fide Power 5, Power 4 talent, and they should be able to be more of a stern test for BYU. But I also think that BYU is going to carry a lot of momentum into that game against Stanford. Stanford had that rare week one off because they played week 0 out there at Hawaii. And that obviously has them, were able to sit at home and watch BYU play in this game. But I think the bigger thing is that BYU will be brimming with confidence. Hawaii's feeling a little bit stung as they lose out there on the islands, but their passing game was absolutely atrocious against Hawaii. So I think that Stanford's going to be a fun one. Ephraim asked this question. Do you think BYU shows the same dominance versus Stanford? You can hope. Honestly, you can hope that they do that. And that's the thing about this is they should be feeling good about themselves because they absolutely just dominated every facet of this game. I don't think I can ever really call. Kalani Sitake always come in, hey, there's stuff to clean up and we'll look at it. He was kind of struggling to say that with a straight face in postgame. It was that dominant of a performance. Yeah, guys like Parker Kingston, you want to clean up that fumbled punt return that he had. You want Ephraim Ossie to be a little bit smarter in terms of smacking a guy in the chin with the crown of his helmet and getting ejected. Those are things you can clean up on, but those are more individual things, whereas the team-wide / schematic stuff, there's just not a lot there to really say, hey, you got to clean that up. Let's get to Lisa's comment here. I'm on a vacation in Alaska. I'm so happy we truly won. The Bear did really well in his first game. Congratulations to Bear for throwing 3 touchdowns and rushing for 2. Yeah, he showed really, really nice stuff for a freshman quarterback making his first career start. And the funny thing is he in the post-game press conference, he was given a lot of 5, 6, 7-word answers. The question I asked him, I think I got a 3-word answer out of it. If you want to go listen to it, you can go over to kslsports.com. We posted the full podcast over there. But really interesting to see how he kind of conducts himself. But he didn't play outside of himself. He didn't try and force the action, and he just took what they gave him. So I really do appreciate the fact that he just went out there and played football. You don't need to have him in terms of trying to triple options, like that type of stuff. That's not worth it at this point. Later on the season, yeah, you start to really open up and see what happens. And I was actually stunned that BYU showed as much as they did offensively with Aaron Roderick. Like we saw that sweep, the reverse sweep to a guy like Cody Hagan. I know you're trying to put it on tape so a team like Stanford has to prepare for it, but I was surprised that even BYU showed something like that on tape, not holding it for Stanford. But there's always that cat and mouse game you feel like going back. Ephraim, good question here. Do you feel disappointed to get more Chase Roberts action? Well, it's kind of the same thing with Chase Roberts and Keanu Tanavasa. They're getting double teamed, it felt like, most of this game. And when you don't get a chance to really get yourself free in the passing game, yeah, you're not going to see a ton out there. So I really do think you look at the performance in totality, just dominance from BYU. Really, really fun stuff. And they should be feeling good about themselves as they get ready to head into now the more meat and potatoes portion of the schedule. Stanford, by no means a world beater, but they do have some talent, and they will be the next step and the next test for BYU a week from now. We'll spend this next week getting ready for it. But I do think that you can look at the performance that BYU put on tonight, and there's enough there to make you think, okay, yeah, this team, they heard all the doubters out there during the offseason. They heard everybody saying that, oh, you lost your quarterback. Yeah, they're going to go 7-5. Like, they've heard all that. But I think that the bigger thing is the talent at BYU, the talent base, is going up every year incrementally. And you're seeing that in terms of this performance. Because I said it before, I thought Kalani Sitake was going to call off the Dogs, and in many respects he did. Halftime, they're up 49-0. What else is he supposed to do? And then they go out there and add another 20 points in the second half. And it was with the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. There's not much more you can do on that. And if it's going to give BYU that extra boost of confidence going into Stanford and then East Carolina and obviously into Big 12 play, go for it. I also like this. Good question here. Big Floppa. BYU thrives off doubt. They did last year. They absolutely thrived on the disrespect card that was being cast their way. And it kind of was the same thing in this preseason. They heard so many people downgrading their ability to really, in many people's eyes, recreate what they had a season ago. But so many guys on this roster were there last year, and in certain respects, defensive line and the like, wholesale changes, but they look just fine. And I really do think that this is a team that thrives on people doubting them and then going out there and proving them wrong. So I really do think that it's going to be a fun season ahead. Crazily enough, if you want to go off just kind of the Big 12 stuff real quick before we go here, BYU and Utah, maybe the most impressive performances of the weekend in the Big 12 so far. Like, I don't think who else would you really throw in there? Utah 43-10 on the road in the Rose Bowl against UCLA. Pretty impressive stuff from the Utes. And BYU smashing Portland State. And we don't have to look any further. Arizona, okay, beat Hawaii 40-6. Okay, great. But yeah, you look at it. Kansas State had to get a last gasp touchdown with 40 seconds to go to beat North Dakota. Yeah, not North Dakota State. North Dakota, the second best team in North Dakota. Iowa State put it on South Dakota. Texas Tech put it on Arkansas Pine Bluff. But I really do think that the best 2 wins of the weekend, in terms of just pure dominance, it probably belongs to the 2 Utah schools, the Utes and the Cougars. So does the state of Utah run the state? Maybe so. Iowa State's got to be in the mix there. I agree. But the dominance that Utah showed, as I said, going up against a fellow Power 4 member, a Big 10 school, the big bad Big 10. Well, guess what? You went to the Rose Bowl and won. That's dominance. And BYU to shut out an opponent, especially when you're putting your 3rd and 4th string defenses out there for a large chunk of that second half. Really, really impressive stuff. And Big Floppa, Kansas State put on a laughable performance. They messed around and almost found out. They absolutely did. So West Virginia looked good. Jonathan said that. Okay, yeah, I would think West Virginia looked pretty good. The nice part is week 1, it's a mixed bag. And I think the biggest point to be had is the Big 12, we're fighting for respect in this conference. And I think it was a good start for BYU. It's a good start for the Big 12 in all, but we will see how things progress as we go through these weeks upcoming. But looking forward to this. Stanford is the next test for BYU. And while they may be the, dregs of the ACC, they are a Power 4 program, and it's a respect thing that BYU needs to go out there and put on this. Okay, good. A final question real quick on this from Ephraim. Do you think BYU gets kept out of the AP top 25 because of Utah's win over UCLA? I will say this. I think that Utah's win over UCLA, they will jump BYU, but I think both BYU and Utah get inside the top 25. I hope that makes sense. I think that Utah maybe jumps because they were like 27th, if I recall. They were one behind BYU. They may jump to like 24th, where BYU jumps into 25th, just because of the level of opponent. So I do think that it's an interesting one all the same. All right, so that's going to do it. Great questions, a great interaction. Appreciate all of your support. And once again, thank you for bearing with me because, I had to double back to LaVell Edwards Stadium. I was like, I'm going to be late getting on that stream. But as always, thank you for all of your support. I will be watching the tape and rewatching the game as I always do. Monday will be a film review Monday that we do in season. My takeaways, rewatching the film, and then we'll start getting ready for Stanford. We're on to Stanford, to use the old Bill Belichick quote. But fun stuff all the same. Good to be back at LaVell Edwards Stadium, and I'm looking forward to the season because it's good to have it back. It's good to have BYU football back in my life, and I'm sure it's good to have it back in your life as well. So as always, thank you so much for all of your guys' support. You guys are the absolute best. Thanks for interacting as always, and we'll be doing this all season long right here on your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU, the Locked On Cougars podcast. Good night.